The same people who were writing the Upanishads and the Puranas were also sailing the high seas and climbing the Himalayas and exploring and trading, innovating in all kinds of different spaces. The beginning of the journey is to begin to have honest conversations with ourselves about modernization and taking ourselves more seriously as a civilization. We need to understand tourism in what it is. It is about the experience. We unfortunately think it's about some monument or something, and not understand it's about the wider experience. In the end, you must feel happy and joyful from the experience of that tourism. It's quite incredible that 95% of all our goods trade is carried by foreign shipping liners. This is in some ways our biggest geostrategic vulnerability because we import so much of our energy.
Namaste. I am sitting with Sanjeev Sanyal, who's a little bit of a mentor, and we started Sangam Talks first with him. I'm in his office, and I'm here to talk to him about the Swarajya Conclave, which is happening on 21st August. So get his views on the importance of India in 2047. Sanjeev, thank you. Before we start, you're an economist, but a lot of focus you give on building the INSV Count India, which is a 4th century merchant ship. You've written a book, Revolutionaries. Now that showreel is out. How does this fit your worldview of economics?
So the important thing that you need to understand is that my purpose in all of this effort is not to build an economy. I'm trying to more broadly build a civilization. So in order to build a civilization, of course, the economic part is very, very significant. But you need to also build a civilizational confidence. You need to build up the cultural aspects. You need to look at technology, another area that I work quite strongly in. So all of these are elements of building a wider civilization. I'm involved in education. As you know, I'm a chancellor of a university. Yeah. So all of these things feed into each other. You cannot build a civilization based on just one leg. It has to have multiple legs that support the whole effort because they feed into each other. So that is why you will find me doing all of these things, but in my head they're actually the same project.
Okay, and why is culture so important?
So in the end,
could you build an economy without focusing on civilization and culture, perhaps?
Not in a sustained way.
Has China done it?
No. China very much focuses on its own culture. Let me tell you, for all the talk people says that they did go and build these Confucius centers all over the world, didn't they?
Yeah.
They promote their own culture. They're very, very suspicious of other, including communist countries, in going and messing around with their internal cultural issues. Okay. So you have to understand that the Chinese communists are ultimately nationalists. The problem is that the Indian communists are also Chinese nationalists. So the agenda is very simple. We need to be clear that this is a wider agenda. So give you an example. Why did I build a 4th century Gupta period ship, and why on earth am I going to even attempt to sail it? It's just not a demonstration piece for...
And you want to sail in it?
Yeah, I want to sail in it myself. The reason for it is very simple. You see, in order to have a civilizational anchor or even build our economy, we need a certain level of confidence in ourselves. We are all very proud of ancient India, but somehow we feel that we are disconnected to it. Something some ancestors did very long time ago. But frankly, chanting mantras is not the whole thing about. You have to live the experience of those ancient people. So what was the spirit that they lived? They had a spirit of adventure. The same people who were writing the Upanishads and the Puranas were also sailing the high seas and climbing the Himalayas and exploring and trading, innovating in all kinds of different spaces. So this is really about a spirit of adventure, a spirit of risk-taking, of innovation. in fact, ironically, later traditions then began to say that we are scared of crossing the ocean. And that didn't protect India.
Yeah.
12th, 13th century onwards, when we began, our thinkers began to argue, crossing the oceans is a bad idea. What happened? We got invaded and taken over first from the land side and ultimately from the oceans only. So the point is, we were a great civilization and a great economy. We are all proud to say we were 1/3 of the world economy at one point in our history. That's only because we had the people who were doing that were also sailing the oceans. They were sailing all the way to Korea and Japan and China on one side. On the other side, they were sailing out to Egypt and Iraq and Persia and so on. So we had a very outward-oriented, risk-taking culture, and we need to celebrate that. So unfortunately, if you read our textbooks, we will get the impression, no, we were, nice people sitting at home, and every time some passing horde came around, we quietly, got beaten up. And then in the end, we requested them, please leave very peacefully. We begged them, and they had pity on us and left. That is the general impression you will get from the narrative, which is not true. There's always been a fire in our civilization, and that fire has to be kept alive. But to do that, we need to tell the correct story of us as a risk-taking, robust people.
Okay. And that, you think, impacts risk-taking in the current entrepreneurs, in the current industries?
So after all, that is the same energy that is there, has to be there. Even see, there's not much difference between the people who are sailing out and and being adventurers on the high seas, and the spirit that also drives innovation in Bangalore or Hyderabad in the labs, or the risk takers in the share market. It's the same kind of spirit. I mean, let's take another civilization. For example, let's take the British. The same people like Francis Drake, he was actually a pirate. Okay. But what did he do? He went and circumnavigated the world. He also was the admiral who beat the Spanish in and sank the Armada. And at about the same time, you also had Shakespeare. You also had Walter Raleigh. So the point I'm making is, what did Elizabethan England have? They had this spirit of adventure and risk-taking.
Somehow people also
you can take it. The spirit of the times. And 19th century Britain. I mean, 19th century Britain is incredible. I mean, okay, we were the receiving end of it in terms of being colonized, but also there were incredible people at another level. I mean, look at the innovations, whether it's the Industrial Revolution or the thinkers like Darwin, who completely changed the way we think about the world, the poetry they wrote. I mean, we are still reading Sherlock Holmes. It's a 19th century Victorian author, and it's great to read them. So there was literature, music, you just name it. I mean, even today, Victorian Britain has such an enormous impact on India, right? Even the iconic buildings in many Indian cities are from the Victorian era.
All the grand buildings are still
so you have to grant Britain had a certain spirit in the 19th century. And that came from a certain civilizational confidence. In India, on the other hand, we lost that confidence, and we can blame colonial histories and all of this kind of thing, but frankly, we are now 78 years after independence. So we can't blame anybody. We have only ourselves to blame, and the reason is that the stories we tell ourselves is what? That we were afraid of crossing the oceans. All the good things in our civilization were given to us because the Mughals came here. Or the British gave it to us. I have no problem with taking in foreign influences and absorbing them. That's completely fine. A lot of modern technology is foreign, so what? But there is this tone in there that somehow we are therefore grateful to the rest of the world, and we shouldn't aspire to do anything on our own.
In this context, were we ever an imperial power?
Yes, at times. I mean, a lot of those empires were within India. I mean, the Mauryans were not non-trivial imperialists, and their empire stretched all the way from eastern Iran through most of the Indian subcontinent.
You've talked about the Cholas.
We have the Cholas, but Cholas did, in fact, Cholas was the end of the period, and in some ways, too much is made of the Cholas.
Okay.
Because in fact, the Pallavas were in fact far more influential in terms of their voyages and the cultural influences they had.
In Southeast Asia?
In Southeast Asia. Most of the scripts that you have in Southeast Asia are derived from Pallava, not Chola script.
Okay.
And just as an example. But we had others as well. The Chalukyas were an extraordinary influence, as indeed were many others. I mean, you had Lalitaditya who had influence in Central Asia, out of Kashmir, and others as well.
I mean, the reason I asked that question is because we are told we were always an inward-looking people.
We weren't. But in fact, we were the first to create multinational capitalism. So for example, when we say that, in ancient and medieval times, Indians were sailing the seas, do remember that this is not individual ship. If the merchant got into a ship and sailed alone, we had thousands of ships. These ships were, for the most part, owned by corporatized guilds. And these guilds had names like, colorful names like Money Gramam and 500, it had 500 shareholders. And many of these corporatized guilds were huge organizations. Many of them lasted for centuries. In fact, they lasted past many dynasties, suggesting that these dynasties also didn't mess with these large corporations because they were so powerful. And even Chola maritime power was heavily backed by the 500.
So these are across generations?
These are across hundreds of years, across many generations, across many kingdoms.
Yeah.
So these large multinational corporatized guilds, you find their inscriptions in Southeast Asia. They had their own navies, they had their own armies. In fact, the Chola raid of 1025 was, at least in part, would have sailed in the ships of the 500. So, you have to understand, and the inscriptions are very clear about how powerful they were. Also important to know how all of this was financed. So, you have all these big Hindu temples. Now, these temples may have been sort of built by the kings or whatever to promote their own image. But do remember that they were full of gold. So where did that gold come from? It wasn't like Indian politicians don't hand over their wealth to somebody just like that. The wealth came from the fact that these temples functioned as banks and venture capitalists. And these great voyages were being financed by these temples.
And contract keepers?
And contract keepers, yes.
Across generations?
Yes, so all of this was done by them. And that is why, why Somnath had such a lot of gold? It's not like the kings of Junagadh were handing all their wealth to them. No. Somnath had wealth because it was a port and they were financing these great voyages from there. If you go to Somnath, you'll see it's literally on the beach.
Yes.
And Somnath and that entire area had several ports which were financed by Somnath temple. And by the way, this tradition continued into the 20th century. So, for example, you know very well, the Kachi merchants were a very important part of the merchant ecosystem all the way into the 20th century, even in the 21st century, in Oman and the UAE and so on. There's a significant Kachi and Gujarati generally, but specifically Kachi business community in that area. But it is important to remember that they were financed actually by the Gosai mutts. So that tradition of these temples, so it was a very intricate system where there were these temple banks financing corporatized guilds with massive networks across the Indian Ocean, backed sometimes by their own navies. So they were not to be messed around with, and kings did not typically mess around. The reason they survived for so long, because the kings were afraid both of picking fights with the temples and with their merchant allies. Yeah. That's why they survived for so long. Picking fights with them was a bad idea.
Superb. I don't know how in today's structures we could sort of reclaim or build some of this back. But let me ask you, why are in context of the Swarajya conclave and in context of India in 2047, why is the next 22 to 25 years really important for us as a civilization?
So it's not just that in 2047 will be 100 years. That's just a coincidence of an anniversary. The real reason the next quarter of a century is important is the following. One is, of course, this will be our demographic peak. Incidentally, we are already in it. And as I keep telling people, in the end of this starting around about 2050-ish, a little bit before maybe, we will begin to age just like everybody else. So this is our demographic peak, and we have already entered into this phase, and it will last about a quarter of a century. So it is for us to take as much advantage of it as we can. Of course, I'm also arguing that we should probably increase our birth rate so that we can prolong this phase for long. Otherwise, at the end of 25 years, we will really have the problem that the East Asia has, which is plunging globally. And by the way, we are well into this phase. Just so that you are aware that our peak in terms of number of births was hit in 2001-2, so 25 years ago. So they are now entering.
That population
is now entering the workforce. That is why we have entered that phase. But I want to tell you that the peak number of babies born in this country happened 25 years ago. Okay, so we are already in it. The pipeline is already the way it is, and I'm just telling you that our number of births in this country are now rapidly declining. And if it declines too fast, yes, we will get a nice flourishing period, but do remember that the end of that process will also happen sooner and much more sharply. So one of the things we need. Anyway, point is, irrespective of whether we can stabilize our birth rates, these 25 years are demographically good. So that's one. Secondly, we have managed finally, after all these years of growth and etc., to build a certain level of economic and technological capability, whether it's infrastructure building out, the regulatory framework has now evolved to a level, we've got rid of a lot of the socialist, not all of it, but significant amount of the socialist era baggage. Our institutions have become better. Regulatory institutions like RBI, SEBI, etc. now have reached a level of maturity. We now have large number of companies of scale, global scale. I mean, something like TCS or Infosys is not a small Indian company, it's a global company. We have pharmaceutical companies of some size. We have engineering companies of some size. They can compete globally, and they do. And we are now finally creating new companies as well. So you are seeing companies like Oyo, for example, suddenly emerge out of nowhere, or Bharat Biotech, or whatever. New companies are beginning to finally emerge out of India, which can have global innovation, Zomato, or whatever. So first time we are beginning to create also new companies are emerging, and so there is a certain momentum, critical threshold of energy that we have hit. That is also, we now have 25 years in which we can do something about this. So
scale them, make them
we can
bigger
scale them.
companies.
So this is also coinciding with one is the sheer scale of our economy also. So we have finally become the world's 4th largest economy. We are about the same size as Japan in 2025, but it is reasonable to expect that in 24 months' time we will go past Germany, and we are of course growing a lot faster than Germany as well. So not only we will reach that level, we will keep going. So there is all these things that are falling in place at this juncture. Now, this is not to suggest that we don't have certain things that we need to still fix, but there is really an opportunity that we have had after centuries to really get back.
And in that context, that's a good segue into asking you what all then needs to happen in the next 25 years.
So I would say, we don't want, many of the things I will now mention, we don't want to wait for 25 years to do. Sooner the better.
In the next 2 years, 5 years.
Whatever, but these are long-term things.
Yes.
The first is obviously fixing our bureaucracy. I'm actually personally more positive on them than many people. I think the culture in bureaucracy is, at least at the upper echelons, has genuinely changed. The problem now is that that culture has to seep through. Everybody loves to have long conversations about trying to fix UPSC and all of that, and I have strong views on that, as you know. But really, that they are no more than 3-4% of the top of the heap. Okay. The bulk of the 95% of the bureaucracy is somewhere else. And that is really what needs to be fixed. And I'm not just, this is not about dumping blame on the lower bureaucracy. The lower bureaucracy also needs attention. It needs to be cleaned up. There's large amounts of it leaderless, sometimes dispirited. And those are environments that create all the corruption and inefficiency everybody complains about. But we need to pay attention to them, create careers, create ways of energizing it that we need to do. I mean, what's the point of blaming a tehsildar if you haven't told him what he's supposed to be doing? He's just sitting there doing whatever he is doing because he's doing it because that's what the momentum is. So we need to begin to pay attention to these things. I mean, the municipal bodies, for example. We need good leadership to go to municipal bodies.
What does that really mean? Where does this?
So that's a longer conversation.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that this point is now finally understood by the bureaucracy itself. Okay. Earlier, when I joined the government, the general mood in the bureaucracy was, we are doing a good job, who are you? But today, I think the bureaucracy has begun to internalize the fact that change is inevitable. And I think I am more hopeful of the bureaucracy. The upper echelons of the bureaucracy, I think, are genuinely beginning to change. Now this has to be done at the lower bureaucracy, at the state level, municipal level. But even there, I don't think anybody is arguing that it doesn't need to be changed. So I think that's one big area. Wonderful. The bureaucracy is one big area, and in specifically the municipal administration part of it. The second big area, of which I have so far not seen any real internal rethinking, is the judiciary. And I think this is in some ways the single biggest constraint to India's growth. It is now more behind the times than the bureaucracy. It needs huge change. And I'm not convinced that the legal system, and I'm not only going to blame the judiciary as in the judges, there's a whole ecosystem. And in fact, many cases, it's the upper echelons of the lawyers and the senior advocates, bar councils, etc., that are actually stopping progress.
Okay.
So that entire ecosystem needs to get out of this sort of self-congratulatory tone that they are doing a good job. They aren't. And I think people need to speak up, and there has to be a public debate about the fact that they are really letting down the side now. And every time I raise even minor issues, you will see a massive pushback because this entire ecosystem is very convinced that it's doing a good job. They'll criticize at the edges, but serious criticism of the judicial system internally does not exist. It's a very self-serving, self-feeding system today.
Yeah, and you're saying that in the context of the collegium system, or
no, it's the whole ecosystem. It's a whole ecosystem that is very self-congratulatory, and they'll spend a lot of time congratulating each other about how wonderful they are doing because one case they've solved beautifully or whatever. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But the point is, there has to be a public debate about it. And there has, but I think that you see greater criticism of it outside, but inside the system, I'm afraid there's very little criticism of the judiciary. As I said, the legal system, not just the judiciary. Actually, in some ways, the senior advocates, the whole system of sort of medieval guilds that they have all created, that has to be unwound.
So, bureaucracy, judiciary. What else?
I think those are the two very big ones that we need to fix.
What about culture? What about, and what would be culture? Would it be, say, freeing temples from the government, or would
yes, I think there's a whole
things need to happen.
Of course, I have spoken before saying that we need to free temples from government control, but I think that is the end point of the journey, not the beginning of the journey. The beginning of the journey is to begin to have honest conversations with ourselves about modernization and taking ourselves more seriously as a civilization. And so that is the other part which links through again to the point I was making, that when we are proud of ourselves as a civilization, we need to understand that pride should not mean that we want to go back to the past.
Sure.
Okay, we don't. We are the whole point about Indian civilization generally and Hinduism in particular is that we are an evolving civilization. That through the ages we have been different things at different times while retaining our Vedic anchors. So Upanishadic Hinduism is different from Puranic Hinduism or later medieval Hinduism or modern Hinduism. I mean, we have our roots in the Vedas, but that doesn't mean that we didn't, huge changes have happened. I mean, Swami Vivekananda and Aurobindo and others have had a huge impact on how things are. And today also you have modern gurus, Sadhguru or Sri Ravi Shankar, etc. They are changing Hinduism in different ways. I would argue that we should embrace all of these things, and the new will come in the future too. So we need to embrace the evolutionary nature of that is our greatest strength. Abrahamic religions are stuck with having to go back to some original text.
Correct.
And the further in time they go away, the rubber band will keep stretching. And as has happened with Christianity in the West, that it's snapped. Right. Well, we don't have to worry about it. Why are we getting caught with that problem? So when I say I want freeing the temples, that doesn't mean that we can go back to the Chola period.
Sure.
We can't.
Sure.
So we have to evolve systems of looking after our temples, creating modern rituals, and not get caught up on so and so Dharma Shastra says, line number 15 says this. That is the way Zakir Naik and company have to code, because their model is based on going back to this.
Got it.
I don't. Modern Dharma Shastras can be written. We can have different formats in different parts of the country for different sampradayas. There is no conflict.
Do you want to talk about, one of my favorite topics or, pet peeves is that Singapore gets far, far greater tourism than the entire India does. I don't know what needs to change here.
So first of all, we need to understand tourism in what it is. It is about the experience. We unfortunately think it's about some monument or something, and not understand it's about the wider experience. In the end, you must feel happy and joyful from the experience of that tourism, whatever that kind of tourism it is. It should be a good experience, right? We, on the other hand, try to do it totally differently. For example, met somebody from tourism from UP a few years ago, not now, a few years ago, when the Agra expressways was built. And that person was very excited. This is fantastic, great for tourism to see the Taj, because now you can go in the morning and come back in the evening. And I was just appalled. Now, I have nothing against having a good highway to get to the Taj, but you have completely misunderstood what the experience is. If he is going in the morning and coming back, what tourism has happened? Nothing. He paid some 500 rupees maybe to enter the thing and came back. Yeah. Whereas in fact, I want that person to go there. I want that person to spend a night or two paying for all the services there, which will create jobs, paying the taxes, having a nice drink, whatever. Whatever is paid highest taxes, he should be encouraged to do.
Correct.
Right? And also what creates the highest amount of activity in
So then
Agra.
What you mean is that the whole city then needs to...
Yeah, you have to, so the purpose is not to have purpose is not to have a fast getaway from Agra, but to stay in Agra and enjoy the experience. So you have to clean the city, you have to create hotels, etc. Maybe across the river, you have to create something so that you can see the Taj. After all, going inside the Taj is not where I'm earning money. I'm getting some 500 rupees from it. It costs more money to sit on the other side of the Taj and have a beer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I need to clean the river. Why not have gondolas going back and forth? I'm just creating random things out of my head. But I'm telling you that is the experience that we sell. And yet, when we try to tell tourism, what are we trying to do? Nearest possible have some brutalist architecture, ugly thing, overlooking the thing, get there fast and come out. No. In many places, you'll see there's a beautiful waterfall, and some state tourism corporation has built some PWD-looking building and has destroyed the whole look of the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, we'll have a lake somewhere in some city. We build a new city. We'll build a lake and we'll build a marine drive kind of thing right next to it. Why? Let people walk along the thing. That is, in fact, the experience.
Yeah.
Not driving past it. That's the fastest. So we do not understand that it's about the experience. And it can be inconvenient also, but it can be a joyful thing. So you can have a windy road going to that place. It's fine. If it's an enjoyable, clean road with nice things to see, people will enjoy the experience. That's what tourism is, which we do not understand.
Yeah.
We understand it in an almost industrial efficiency way. And then, therefore building a cheap PWD department, ugly, brutalist building right in front of a beautiful waterfall is somehow okay. I mean, go to Cherrapunji, you've got a new NID there. It's a design school, yeah? Built with the most ugly possible architecture, which is not even conducive to that place. At least if it had some nice roofs, it would look like something related to a place that rains heavily. It's actually brutalist square PWD buildings. Why?
Terrible. What needs to change?
It's a mindset that we've lost the sense of aesthetics, the loss of fun. We try to do this in the sort of Soviet kind of joyless kind of way.
I mean, is this also to do with I'm sorry to get into a little bit of detail, is this a lot to do with how the government offers contracts, L1s and all of that?
Maybe, it is, yes, but it doesn't derive from L1. It derives from a lack of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And it comes from, therefore, that's what I said, we have to think of ourselves as a civilization. It's not about building that building there.
Correct.
It's not about the experience. It's about having some pride in that thing.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody is thinking of this as a government contract. It is not about the contract. It's about creating something worthwhile in a place that you're proud of. It requires a certain level of pride, therefore, in what you're doing.
Yeah.
After all, nothing in the general contracting rules, GFR rules, says that you have to build an ugly building there. The L1 comes from a lack of pride.
Yeah.
Let me be very clear. L1 is blamed repeatedly, but L1 happens because of a lack of pride. If the officials who are trying to do whatever it is they are trying to do and wanted to do something better than L1, there is full freedom there, by the way, to do it.
Yeah.
After all, the PWD department only built Victoria Terminus. And it was the PWD department that built North Block, South Block, Rashtrapati Bhavan. So they could do it in the British period.
Yeah.
Why can't they do it now? Because the British had a certain level of pride. They knew at some point they would have to leave and we would remember them. In fact, they say so in one of the, we go to the Jaipur column, somewhere they say that, at some point we want that, the Indians will remember our rule in a positive sense. Wow. So they say it, they are very conscious of this. Whereas when we do it, we are not conscious of we're just trying to do it. So therefore, what do? You will go to an Indian building, you will see some politician who had nothing to do with inaugurated it.
Correct.
But it's never the names of the engineers.
Yes.
Who was the person who thought of doing it? Their names are not written.
So in some sense, the new parliament is that iconic.
Yes, in a sense it is a break, right? For the first time we know who designed it. It's Bimal Patel.
Yes.
Just like Lutyens. So, whether we like it or not, we can have a debate.
Also the grandness of it.
Yeah.
Right?
So, yes. So, in fact, this is a very good place to tell you an interesting story. The only building till this new parliament was built, the only public building of some grandeur that was built in India after independence is the Vidhan Sauda building in Karnataka. Okay. Bangalore. That is the only one. I cannot think of any building of some grandeur that was built after independence. There's some ugly buildings built in Chandigarh that we are told are beautiful, but please go and see the secretariat. It's ugly rubbish. The only building of some stature built was Vidhan Sauda building in Bangalore. The person who built it was in fact ironically investigated and persecuted for building that building. Okay. Why? Because that's a mindset. He was asked, why did you spend more? He was asked why he didn't do L1. He spent only a tiny bit more than was necessary and built something really beautiful that really stood the test of time. And yet he was investigated and questioned about why he built it. Whereas nobody questioned the ugliness of Chandigarh State Secretariat, which is literally one of the ugliest buildings ever built.
How do we change this specific thing?
No, it's a matter of pride in yourselves as a people. So we imported some Gora who built some fascist-looking building. You'd only have to go and stand in front of the secretariat in Chandigarh to realize how astonishingly ugly it is. And yet we are told that it is beautiful, and generations of architects have internalized the fact that it's a good-looking building. But it's obvious it's ugly. Right? You go and in fact look at SPA building.
Yeah.
Right, in Delhi. It's where all the architects are trained. I mean, literally you cannot imagine a more ugly building.
Correct.
And yet, nobody in SPA has thought of tearing it down and rebuilding it. They're lecturing everybody else to do it. Why? Because there's no pride in what you're doing. Some Gora has said this is good looking, okay.
And how do we change this mindset? How do
it requires a certain, that's what I say,
Storytelling?
it requires a regeneration of ourselves, of our civilizational pride.
How do we do that? By storytelling?
Some part of it is storytelling, some part of it is demonstration, some part of it is economic success, some part of it is celebrating those who take risks and do things. You know, till very recently, who were we celebrating? If I wrote a book, 50 great Indians or something, who would be the great stars in that? Mother Teresa or somebody like that, who's not even properly Indian. Right? But why? Because the idea would be, हम लोग गरीब हैं, गरीब थे, और माँ कसम किसी तरीके से गरीब ही रहेंगे.
हर समय जुगाड़ और mediocrity.
So this is the important thing. We need to change that. And I am quite conscious of this because in my own lifetime, I watched my city of birth, Kolkata, go through that cycle downwards. Once you celebrate mediocrity, there is no limit to which you cannot drop.
Do you want to spend, the next quick few minutes on talking about, I saw your tweet on that India is going to build its own ship insurance company.
Yeah, but that's part of a wider thing we are doing. I mean, it's just a sector that we are trying to build out. And I'll tell you why it's important. I mean, it's quite incredible that 95% of all our goods trade is carried by foreign shipping liners.
Wow.
Okay. Now, if you look at a map of India, just look at it.
Yeah.
Okay. On one side, we have Pakistan, whom we don't trade. And the other side is China, with whom we do trade, but not with the parts with which we have a border. Okay. So, from a strategic and economic perspective, we are actually an island nation. Okay. We are as much an island nation as Japan and the UK.
Yeah.
Okay. But do we have a shipping fleet? No. We have some 480 ships that are, ocean going, and most of them are small vessels. So we don't really have a cargo merchant navy kind of any size. We do have some sort of a navy which is quite competent, and now we're investing in it. But the merchant navy fleet is ridiculously small. And so I have been arguing now for a couple of years that, look, we need to invest into this. This is in some ways our biggest geostrategic vulnerability because, we import so much of our energy, we import inputs into all our manufacturing, and life generally today would not be possible without contact with the rest of the world, but we have no control of that contact because of this lack of a maritime merchant fleet. So, as part of that, we have to do many things. So, one is revive the shipbuilding yards. We have, interestingly, India actually has shipbuilding capability. We are one of the few countries that can build a nuclear submarine, we can build aircraft carriers, destroyers, etc., etc. And yet we somehow don't build much simpler things like oil tankers or cargo, container vessels, etc. So why don't we do this? We have what do you need? You need steel. We are the world's second largest steel manufacturing country. You need young workers, men, basically young men, because shipbuilding is essentially long hours of welding.
Okay.
We have that. We have a coastline. We have domestic demand. We have design capability. We have everything. But for some reason, we didn't get into this industry in a serious way. So I began making this point about a few years ago, 2-3 years ago. And over time, I am pleased to see that this is now a national mission.
Yeah.
And you can see in the last 18 months, there's been a lot of work in this.
Also declared as an infrastructure.
Yeah, we have got ships declared as infrastructure. For some reason, we didn't consider ships as infrastructure.
Yeah.
We are now building the financing of it. We've created a national maritime fund. A lot of effort is going into wooing some of the global majors to come to India, and so on and so forth. And of course, the Indian government itself will create a national fleet with investments into a whole bunch of, I think, 112 ships of our own. So a lot of money is going into shipbuilding as an industry, and then the ecosystem. Then also we are making changes in ship ownership, flagging, all those laws that were restrictive, we are now changing those. And so a huge emphasis is going into this sector.
I want to talk about one last point. I mean, I have so many more questions, but lack of time. But one last point on perhaps having a sovereign fund. Do you think we should, for investments in companies, in private companies globally? I mean, are we thinking on?
Well, it depends. I think that is something the private sector should do for the most part. There may be
not the government?
I'm generally skeptical of government doing these kinds of things. We already have a large foreign exchange reserves which we invest in assets. They are good, liquid assets. That is necessary. Sovereign fund to go around shopping around the world for, say, minerals and so on. By and large, government can support, but by and large, I am in favor of letting the private sector do it, even if we support some Indian companies to do it. It could be a public sector company, but generally speaking, governments will not be able to run these kinds of funds efficiently.
Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave us your comments, and hopefully I can follow this up with a much deeper conversation on many other topics with Sanjeev. And hope you enjoy watching this video. Thank you. And please do come for the Swarajya Conclave. It's on 21st August. And, you'd have to buy your tickets. Sanjeev is over there as well. Have a full day packed. Thank you very much.